In 1997, a small island disappeared in the Pacific, engulfed in what only can be described as a massive weather event. It took with it the lives of 4 meteorologists and 1 pilot. Their bodies were, of course, never found. This event may not seem familiar, and that's because it never happened. At least, that's what the US government claimed. I worked for them in 97. I was a younger man then, tempted by the thrill of storm chasing. When they offered to sponsor my hobby, I accepted without a second thought, sure that I would be thrusted into the heart of the most deadliest situation imaginable. I in fact spent most of my time behind a computer screen, monitoring blimps on a radar and reporting my findings to my superiors. I wasn't the one to find the island in the Pacific. It landed on my desk one day, in order to keep an eye on this place, an uninhabited mark on my screen. For weeks I did constant checkups on this small place that had no abnormal patterns present. It began to confuse me. Why was I watching a place where nothing happened? And then it began. At first it seemed like a hurricane. It had all the features of one, except one. It hadn't formed over water. The storm had formed over the land itself, it seemed. My radar showed the ever-increasing weather clearly, and I noted it carefully in my report. For weeks I watched the island in the Pacific, and then I received a memo. My supervisors would begin working with me to study the island itself and track the odd patterns that were present. However, we were only aides to the others. 4 meteorologists would be sent to the island to observe the conditions for themselves and see what samples they could collect from the island and the atmospheric conditions near it. We would be sent their findings and do further analysis on them. While I would have preferred to be sent to the island myself, I was fine working behind the scenes, especially with the raise in pay that came along with this specific project. Our team was moved from our station into another room in our facility, and in the week preceding the meteorologist's search, we continued to observe dangerous patterns on the island. Talking among ourselves, we on the team suggested that the researchers not go, out of concern for their safety. The higher-ups did not agree with us though, and they told us that the research was of the utmost importance and it needed to be conducted. This news was blunt, and when it was given, it was definite and unwavering. In my boss's eyes, I saw something though, and I was surprised to see it. Fear. The meteorologists were taken to the island via a small plane. We on the team were not given anything but identifiers for them so we could track their findings. No names, just A, B, C, D, and P. P was for the pilot of the plane. The team was kept very unaware of everything going on, even in the terms of research being sent back. The meteorologists were told to use a code for what they had found on the island, which we would then give to our supervisors. It was strange reading reports of high levels of Klondike in the air and traces of beta in the soil. It was also secretive, so restricted from us. We were the middleman and only there to receive these odd messages. The only actual person we were able to communicate with was the pilot, who was able to speak to us through a radio installed on his plane. This was hardly ever used, though. The researchers' first week on the island was normal, excluding the code used. They relayed information back to us at a normal rate based on the findings. Everything seemed to run very smoothly. We monitored the weather they described on our screens: pouring rain, high winds, and hail. It was the second week where the real abnormalities began. The meteorologists stopped sending us reports. We tried every possible way to contact them, but only silence came from their end. Even our superiors seemed alarmed by this. They began to get involved. They visited our offices more and always were asking on the progress of the operation to get a signal. For a full week we heard absolutely nothing back. And then out of nowhere it came. One single transmission. 3 words that still fill me with dread when they creep into my head late at night when no one else is there. C is dead. And that was all. Immediately, our communications room was filled with people of high rank. Not only my superiors, but my bosses. They scrutinized those 3 words, searching for a story that wasn't written. We on the weather team stayed back and watched the chaos unfold in front of us, the men scrambling to find an answer. Then the second message came through. We'll continue mission as planned. It was so cold. Like the island, it was distant, isolated. We couldn't feel what was there in the words. If we could, I'm not sure we would have felt any better. What could we do, though? We waited for the higher-ups to leave and continued our work without talking to each other. We kept quiet to ourselves, mulling over the strange horror that had taken our team by surprise. I doubt we could have told each other what we were really feeling that day, and even if we tried. The next day, I didn't really want to come to work. I felt drained and out of place. I was being taken for a ride that I didn't want to go on. I was kidnapped and held hostage by the circumstances I had put myself in. Apparently my team must have felt the same way because only half of us showed up that day. Strangely, the routine became normal again. The meteorologists began transmitting at a normal rate again with their strange code made specifically for people that were not us. This went on for another week and reports were coming in at a normal rate, and strangely it seemed that the event faded from our memory. That was until it happened again. It came again as we were all about to leave the office, as we packed up our satchels and put on our jackets. We received another transmission from one of the researchers that made us all stop in our tracks. Lost A and D. Unlikely they will return. Cannot continue with search. Investigation has shown positive. For God's sake, send help. Evacuation is needed. Release us from this hell. We were speechless. It truly was more than any of us can handle. Some left the room to get our supervisors. Some left to get air, and a lot left and never came back. We were weather experts, not soldiers. Loss was not something we were used to. This message hit the team hard. Again, people crowded into our small room to gawk at our computer screens. But in my boss's eye, I saw no surprise. Only regret. There were no transmissions for a while. To the team, this was almost a blessing. We were afraid of what the next message might be, so for us, it was better not to hear back at all. There were only a few of us left on our team now. Our small computer room had become a terrifying portal to a strange land. On our screens, the storm still raged, only getting more intense every day. It grew in size and density, expanding grotesquely before our eyes. It was the following Tuesday that we received our final word from the island. We had had no transmissions for 5 days, apart from the spare letters and numbers that made absolutely no sense. We all jumped when the crackling came from the radio we used to communicate with the pilot. It began as heavy breathing, compressed under a layer of static. I quickly tuned the radio to find the most clear frequency. A shrill female voice cut through suddenly. Not the male pilot I had heard before, and I leaned forward to listen. Under all counts, I know what I have done is treason. If you are reading this, please, allow me to return. You do not know the horrors here. Please, let me return. Beneath her desperate cries, the sound of a storm raged. After the radio transmission, she still spoke, uttering prayers and repeating her last statement over and over again. For 5 minutes she did this. We sat with our hands, covering our open mouths, unsure how to proceed. Someone went to tell the supervisor, but he never came in to see. There were no onlookers this time, just our team and the sounds of the radio. After those 5 minutes, her prayers turned into a shriek. She shouted, and then the radio transmission cut out. On our computer screens, the storm completely overtook the island. It increased drastically in size, density, and speed. All of the team left the room except for me. Some cried, others were too shocked to speak. But I stayed, infatuated by what I saw displayed on the screen. The storm moved so fast. I watched it as it moved, breaking apart, and I saw the pieces move into the ocean. As the storm cleared, I refreshed my screen to make sure I hadn't encountered a glitch in my system. The island was gone. I was offered a large severance package the next day to thank me for my help on the project. I took the money and I never went back to storm chasing. I can hardly stand the rain. When it beats on my windows at night, I am only reminded of the colors on my screen that shook me to my core so many years ago. I'll never know what was on that island, and I'm fine with that. I'm not sure if I really want to know.